Hey guys, how's it going? I got a really cool video for you today. You ever wonder how to do dark mode on your own application, perhaps your personal website? Here I've got a very nice example of how to pull that off. And as a special bonus, I'll even show you how to do this so that it responds to your OS settings. So as you can see, I have Mac OS here and it's responding to my selection. Now there's several ways to pull this off, but I think I have the solution here that is the simplest, something that you can spin up in 10 minutes or less, maybe 5 minutes. We'll see how long it takes, but why don't we just get it started? So I've got a terminal here open at my desktop, and I'm just going to use Create React App to create a new application from scratch so you can follow along. So we're going to run the following commands: npm create react app, and then the name of your application. I'm just going to call mine React Dark Mode. Should take a few minutes to install, maybe a couple seconds. Alright, once it's done, just open that up in your Visual Studio Code or your preferred editor. Alright, so I got my code in VS Code here. And before we actually do anything, I'd like to first spend a minute to talk about, what is a good solution to dark mode? What are the things that you have to keep in mind? So first of all, you probably want something that allows you to define multiple themes for your application, right? So a dark mode is really just saying my application now has both a light and a dark theme, but a good solution will also allow for multiple themes beyond just those two. So for example, maybe you'll have a high contrast theme or whatever different color palettes you want to apply to your application. Second, you want something that is able to inform your entire application what that current theme is. So you can imagine in React, that's probably going to be something that's related to context. And then third, you want to think about user preferences. So in the beginning of this video, I showed how ideally we're able to pull in the user preference from their OS settings. Maybe there's a person that prefers only dark mode, or someone who prefers light mode, or maybe they don't care. Or alternatively, if they don't set that setting in their OS, maybe it's something that as they select the toggle on your application, you want to be able to save that choice either in your backend or perhaps in local storage. So in general, a good solution needs to be able to keep track of user preferences. With all of that mentioned, like I said, I believe I discovered potentially one of the best solutions to this problem, this set of problems, and I think Theme UI has the best solution for it. What is Theme UI? Theme UI is a library for creating themable user interfaces based on constraint-based design systems. So it's actually a lot more than just a solution to dark mode. There's a lot more things that it can do, and specifically if you're trying to create an application that has multiple themes or some kind of design system, this is a really good base for it. And honestly, I could probably dedicate an entire video on Theme UI alone, but in this video we're going to focus on the solution for doing dark mode. The Theme UI website actually has this button on the top right that allows you to change the color mode, which is basically what we're trying to do, right? Like I said, we're just going to have an application that has two color modes, light and dark, but Theme UI actually allows you to add multiple colors if you wanted to. So as you can see here, it's going from light to dark to deep, Swiss, and each time I click on that, it changes the colors in the application, the colors of the text, the colors of the buttons, etc. So again, I'd love to focus on Theme UI, and I'll probably make a dedicated video for it, but for now, I just want to focus on the dark mode solution itself. Alright, so back in the code, we're actually going to go ahead and install Theme UI. So we're going to do npm install theme-ui. Alright, once that installs, we're going to create a theme.js file, and this is going to be the file where we define a lot of these theme variables. So I'm going to create a theme object, and I'm gonna export this. Alright, and first thing we're gonna put in here is the colors key. And again, you don't have to fully understand Theme UI. I think if you follow along, it'll be pretty intuitive. So here we're gonna define our base colors. So for example, let's say that we have black text and we want the background to be white. And then usually with design systems, or if you're trying to make your own color palette, you'll have some kind of primary color. So I have this randomly selected hex color that you'll see in a second. All right, so that's all our theme is for now. We're going to add to it. But first, let's see how to utilize this theme in our application. First of all, within this index.js, the root starting point of our application, we need to provide, like I mentioned, we need some kind of theme provider, which theme UI comes with. So I'm going to import theme provider from theme UI, and then I'm also going to import the theme we just created, and then we're going to wrap our entire application with this theme provider. Next, make sure to feed your theme into here as a prop. And that's really the setup that you need to do, and we'll see how it works as we start this application. So I'm going to go ahead and run npm start, and here's what my app currently looks like. It's just like any bare bones initial React project. Now it's not utilizing those theme colors yet that we defined earlier, so we need to sort of hook it up first. Now as you can see, this application comes with some default CSS, so we're going to want to turn off the colors that are defined in here. So for example, app header has this background color that we're going to remove. It's got the text color that we're going to remove. It's got a link color that we're going to remove as well. So right now our application just looks, whatever a default colors will be for these things. So for example, this regular blue for a link. And the nice thing that with the solution that we're going to use is, as you can see, it still works with existing CSS if you want to. Right now, there's no other hard-coded color in any of the existing styles, and the only thing that it's pulling from is the theme. So we can kind of see this in action. Is right now, because we have the background as white, it still looks white as before. But for example, if I change this to red and hit refresh here, now our application is red, right? That's pretty cool. So it automatically sort of utilizes this background key to figure out what is the color of my application's background color. What is the color of the text, right? So if I make this white, let's do black and white here, just so you can see better. If I hit refresh here, we've got black as a background and white as text, right? So even just here, you can already see the power of theme UI and how it's gonna get us to dark mode, right? Is that really we just need a way to define a different set of colors, which we're gonna get to in a second. So I brought this back to my original colors of white background, black text, but I want to also be able to utilize this primary color in different places in my application. So for apps, maybe in links, maybe in buttons. So we need to have a way to pull in that color from the theme. Now theme UI has a really cool solution to this as well, which is the SX prop, which is, you can kind of think of it as a it's like the style prop but on steroids. And or to be more specific, it's like the CSS prop from Emotion, but on steroids. So the way you enable it is by using this JSX pragma. So we're going to copy this JSX import. I'm going to add that to the top of our file like this. And what that enables us to do is it then allows us to start using the SX prop. If you've ever used Emotion CSS prop, it's very similar. You have to do something similar to that. So remember that we deleted class link, the app link CSS, right? So that doesn't even do anything. So let's delete that. But now that we have this JSX import source theme UI, we can now start using this SX prop. And within here, you can define, just like any regular object style CSS that you have. So for example, maybe you want to do font weight bold, right? And you'll see our text, our link text is now bolded. But beyond that, it also has some special powers. So if I want to pull out the primary color, for example, I just do color primary, right? And typically this would be sort of invalid in usual style, like if this was just style like this. But SX is able to say, take me this key and I'm going to look it up in my theme object, right? So it's going to go in here, it's going to go into colors, and it's going to find out what is primary, and it's actually going to swap in this color. With that in action, you'll notice that it's hard to notice, but it's a slightly different blue, right? So let me use a more noticeable color here just so you can see. Let me make this red. And as you change this theme, you may or may not need to refresh your browser just to see an effect. But as you see, when I refresh, now it's a red text, right? So it's able to use this color primary and pull in something from our theme. So I'm going to bring that back to the bluish hex color here. There's a lot more to the SX prop. There's actually a lot of things that it can do, but I'm not going to cover that in this video. Right now, we just needed to pull values out of our theme, specifically for colors and background colors, because that's what you need for dark mode. All right, so as another example, why don't we add a button in here, and this is gonna be our toggler. You can of course use your own toggle component, like maybe you want that little switcher that goes back and forth like that. We're just gonna keep it simple here. Right, so we're just gonna have a toggle button here, and then kind of similar thing is I want to be able to color this. So perhaps let's do a background color of our primary, whatever our primary is in a color palette. But as you can see, if we use the primary on the button, the text doesn't look so great anymore. Ideally, it's probably a more lighter color. So why don't we go ahead and define a special key for that? Let's call this inverse text, which we'll do white. And then we'll just do color inverse text. And now we got the blue button with white text. And by the way, another thing with SX is there's actually a shorthand. There's a lot of shorthands. So for example, background color, you can just do BG, and that's the same thing. All right, so we've got our code and it's hooked up to the theme, so it's already kind of working. Now we just need to be able to define a different color mode, which in this case is going to be dark mode, and then B, we need a way to toggle that. So back in our theme.js file, first of all, we want to define what's the name of our initial color theme, which is by default just light. So whatever is the colors here, it represents light. Now what if we want to define a different color mode? We do that using the modes key, and we just provide a name for that different mode. So in this case, we're going to call it dark. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to repeat these same keys up here, except I'm going to define the color of what I want it to be when it's in dark mode. So for example, instead of the text being black, it's going to be white. The inverse is going to be black. The background is going to be this bluish dark color. And then primary is just going to be a lighter shade of this blue that we have up here. Now real quick before we see this in action, a site that's really useful to know about is color.review. It kind of allows you to grade the different color combinations that you have. So for example, in your example here is if they have background white and this bluish color on the foreground, it says that, oh, the score for that is AAA, meaning there's really good contrast, in terms of accessibility. And you can kind of play around with the colors here. As you can see, if there's not very good contrast between your two colors, as you can see over here, it starts to tell you that this has a really bad grade, or even maybe it fails. So you want to kind of aim for something that has AAA or AA in general, just as you want to have good contrast for accessibility. And then another tool that you can use, and I'm not a designer, so I don't know a lot about what's a good set of color combinations. What I kind of did for this tutorial was, I pulled up a color, and then I just googled the hex color, and then this site allows me to see different shades of that color. So then a good way for you to test this out is just have a color for your primary and then pick a slightly lighter or darker shade of that color depending on what mode you're on. So for example, if we're in the darker side here for our light mode, you might want to pick something more towards the left for your dark mode. So that's one easy way to get and define colors if you're not super sure like me and you're not the designer. But of course, if you do have a designer, make sure to consult them with what's a good set of colors. Anyways, back into the application itself. Now that we have the themes configured, or the modes, we now have a dark mode, and effectively this is defining the light mode, because we're saying this is the initial color mode name and this is the default color. So that means that this is the light mode colors, this is the dark mode colors, and you can actually define one-to-many modes in here, but we're just going to focus on one, which is dark. Okay, if we take a look at our application, it still looks the same as before, but we need to be able to add a way to toggle this dark mode on. So how do we do that? Well, Theme UI actually comes with a hook that allows you to do exactly that. If you import use color mode from Theme UI, it kind of has a similar syntax to use state. So it comes with a color mode, which is the value, and then a setter. and then you can just use that to toggle the mode. We can use what the current color mode is, which we said was default light, and kind of define our toggler here. So on our button, we should be able to do a on click, and we can do something like set color mode to the inverse of what currently is on the application. So if the current color mode is light, then I want to toggle to dark. Otherwise, it's probably in dark, then I want to toggle to light. All right, so pretty simple. And then you can do the same thing. You can use that color mode value as well to do different displays depending on what the color mode is. So for example, I'm just going to update this text here to dynamically show if it's light. I want to show the toggle to be dark with a moon. If it's currently in dark mode, I want to show the word light and then a sun emoji. All right, so let's take a look at what our application looks like. So now it says toggle dark with the moon on it, and if we click the button, now we can switch. That's it. You got dark mode. It's working, right? And you can see that the text is changing colors from white to black. And similarly, our button and the link is using the primary color that we defined, which is this lightish blue that's kind of similar to the React blue, but as I click it, it's changing from that lighter blue to darker blue. And again, that's why I was saying you want to be able to have a color that basically you want a slightly different primary color in light and dark mode, because it's hard to find a color that works for both light and dark modes. So again, you might want to switch to a slightly different tint of that same color when you switch. And again, reminder to play around with this site to have a color that is accessible. All right, so now that we have this, what else is left? Well, in the beginning we said that an ideal solution is able to take care of the user's preferences. Well, this actually saves it in local storage. You don't even have to do anything. So for example, if I'm currently in dark and I refresh, it's already in dark. If I switch to light and refresh, it's already in light. So this is actually saving the user selection in local storage. So if I open up application local storage here, you'll see that there's a key here for theme UI color mode, which is light. And if I toggle it, it updates it to dark. And if you know about local storage, as you refresh, whatever is in the storage is preserved. It's persisted, right? So this solution is so simple. You could have probably done this in, again, 5 minutes or less. All you needed was the theme, this color switcher, and then just a little bit of configuration with the styles, and that's it. Now there's one other aspect of this that is really cool that I want to point out is we mentioned that ideally we're able to also take in the user preference from the OS. So if they maybe have dark or light theme specifically selected, we want to be able to take that value. Well, this solution actually already does that. It's kind of hidden from you. So if I clear out this value that we have dark selected and I refresh, it's gonna again save that light. But let me remove this and let's set up our operating system to have the preference of dark mode, right? So I'm going to select dark here. And what I expect to happen is when I refresh the page, it's actually going to take that into account. So if I reload the page, you'll notice that it now starts out as dark mode. So it takes into account what is the user preference from the OS, and then it looks, is there also a user preference saved in the local storage, and then it makes the decision into what is the default color for this person, right? So you notice that it initializes as dark. So basically our solution is already 90% of the way there from what I showed in the beginning of the video. There's one other missing piece is, what if we want to be able to listen in to the user selection as they're toggling from the OS and not the browser or their toggle button here? How do we listen into that? So imagine a situation where we maybe don't want to necessarily have a toggle, but we still want to listen in for the user's preferences from their device or their OS. which is something that you see in a lot of mobile applications, for example. So let's talk about how we're going to manipulate our solution to account for that use case. So what we're going to do is I'm actually going to clear out this local storage value because we don't want that in there. And in the code, I'm actually going to add configuration in here that says I don't want to use local storage. And to do that, we're just going to do use local storage false. And why don't we need or want local storage is because it's already stored in the OS. The OS itself is storing the selection, so we don't have to add additional storage ourselves. So we actually want that off. Now next, we need to be able to listen for the changes in the OS to react to it. Now we talked about how Theme UI is actually using the prefers color scheme, which is a CSS feature, if you didn't know about it, that allows you to listen for the OS scheme. You can see an example here in the Mozilla docs where they have some results here. If I pull up my OS system preferences again and put it side by side with this, you'll notice the boxes here change in color as I toggle between these two. So it shows that with just plain CSS, you can actually listen in for this value that the user selected in their OS. So that's really cool. So what we need to tell React is to just, hey, listen to this change in the media query using a media query and do our toggle, right? So we already have the ability to toggle. We just need the ability to listen for that change. So how might we do that? Again, several different solutions, right? But this is the simplest one I found, which is the React responsive package, which is really cool. It allows you to use a hook to define a query, a media query, and then you can just do things based on whether or not that query is true, right? So for example, in here, you're able to define a query of, is it a desktop or a laptop screen? So we should be able to use this to also pull out a value, or at least something that listens in for, are we in dark mode or not? So I'm gonna go ahead and copy this and install React Responsive in our application. So I'll open a new terminal here and install React Responsive. All right, once complete, back in our code, in our component here, I'm just gonna import use media query from React Responsive, and then we're gonna do use media query, and we're gonna provide it a query, which is we wanna see if the preferred color is dark, we wanna do something about it, right? And we can definitely just we can turn this into a Boolean value, or we can just provide a callback here, which allows us to do some logic if that value changes or becomes true, right? So this takes in a value of the true or false Boolean based on this query, right? So if they prefer dark, so let's call this is dark preferred. Let's spell that right. We're gonna do set color mode. If is dark is preferred, let's set the mode to dark, else set it to light, right? So it's a toggle. So again, real quick review is we're defining a query and we're saying we're gonna listen for that query to happen. If it becomes true, we're gonna call this callback, and then we're just gonna call our set color mode. That's it. Let's take a look at how this works. So I got my browser here on the left and my system settings on the right, and as I click dark, the application goes into dark mode. If I go into light, it goes into light mode. The nice thing with this is if a user, for example, has this auto setting, then in theory, as they go into sunset or whenever this triggers to go from light to dark automatically based on their time, then it's also going to trigger your application to automatically respond to that, which is a really cool feature. And this toggle button still works as before. So again, it's up to you sort of what you want to enable. Do you want to save it in local storage, or do you just want to take the value that the system itself has? It's up to you. Either way, the solution that we have here is super simple and very easy to set up. And Theme UI has so much more features to it that I'd love to talk about, probably in a future video. If you think that's something interesting to you, let me know in the comments. Anyways, you guys, don't want to make this video any longer than it needs to be. Again, the point was, how can we do dark mode in the simplest way possible, in the quickest way possible? And I really believe this is probably one of the easiest ways to pull it off. That's it, guys. I'm going to end the recording here. Let me know if you got any feedback, or maybe if you have a better solution. I'd love to know about it. But I'm personally really excited about this one, so I'm probably going to stick to it unless I find something better. Anyways, if you like this tutorial, make sure to subscribe, like, you know what to do. Do all those things. Anyways, hope you have a great day, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks.